Hello, everyone. Welcome to Value Selling's complimentary webinar today. Today, we are going to be talking about objections. And often that objections really come up, and it doesn't mean no, even though it might sound like no. It means not yet or not enough information. My name is Julie Thomas, and I am going to be your guide for the next 45, 50 minutes. I do want to let you know that I'll be addressing any questions that come up during the content. So if you have any questions, please feel free to type them in the Q&A panel that you have access to as an attendee, and we'll address those either at the end or throughout the session, as my producer will bring all those questions to my attention. Also, if there's anything specific that you want to make sure we address in today's content, please use your question for that as well, and I'll do my best to address that throughout today's content. I would like to let you know that we are recording today's session. So if you, for whatever reason, want to come back and listen to it a later time or share it with a colleague, you'll have access to that, and I'll share with you at the end of today's session how you can do that. Interesting fact that you may or may not be interested in, but this has been one of our highest registered webinars in a few months, which to me says this topic is hot. And as I look at all of you logged in from different companies in different industries, the fact that addressing and being prepared in handling objections is almost across the board. Any sales professional has to master this skill and have an approach to be successful as objections come into the sales process that you're going through. So let's start to dive into it. Well, first of all, what is an objection? An objection is often a question that the customer might throw at you, or it could be a roadblock that comes into the sales process that you might be managing or the sales conversation you might be having. And it could be as simple as, I think that the solution isn't what we need, to I think your price is too high, to any other question or comment that might come up. So we're going to talk about the different types of objections that we get and some of the areas that we can get better at handling them and some of the skills involved in handling objections. So let me ask you this. What are some of the objections that really make you crazy? What comes up in your sales cycle? I am going to open up a poll here real quick and go ahead and select which one of these are the objections that you most often hear, and I'm asking you to select one. Is it the price? Many of you are on this line and use the value selling framework because you sell a premium priced product. You are not the lowest cost alternative in your space. So is that something that comes up regularly? Is it how you package your services? Is there an issue that comes up with your packaging? Maybe you've got one approach that you bundle in some capabilities and the client might push back on that. Is it the terms and conditions you offer? Maybe I want longer payment terms. Maybe I want a shorter contract period. What could it be? Is it that nasty competitor has muddied the water, has maybe thrown some fear, uncertainty, and doubt into the customers? Or is there something else? And if there is something else, go ahead and use that Q&A bar to share that with us. And so let's talk about that. So go ahead and submit your answer, and let's see what those results look like. Interesting. Over 50% of us say it's price. And it's interesting to look at that. About a quarter of you have issues with competition, and we'll look at what some of those other objections are. Oh, here's an interesting. Don't even have the time to talk about it. So it's an objection that comes up to even having a conversation, not an objection to getting to a agreement. We're going to be talking mostly today about those objections that come up in the course of a sales conversation that become a barrier to gaining agreement. I'll touch lightly on some of those objections that are really just brush-offs to having time, which is, why should I meet with you? I don't have time. I don't have budget. I don't have a need, whatever that might be that come up from that perspective. But lots of price, packaging, and terms. And interestingly enough, when it comes to getting to an agreement, those three things are often very related. Price is always a function of the deliverables and the terms. So as we talk about how objections can sometimes be a negotiating tactic, we'll talk a little bit about negotiating on price, packaging, and terms as well. So here's what we're going to talk about today in the detailed agenda that I'm going to approach with all of you. Number one, we're going to talk about the buying process. What is it at a high level that a customer goes through when they're making a decision to buy the types of products and services that you sell, which are not commodities. They are big decisions with implications to the businesses that you're calling on. We're going to also talk a little bit about urgency, because sometimes objections slow that urgency down. So how can we get ahead of that and address that as well? Then I'm going to walk you through the value selling frameworks objection handling process. What does that mean? What's your role, and how can we get better at that? And as I mentioned before, we'll address any questions that come up through that process as well. So, what is an objection? Well, an objection can be anything that's going on in the customer's mind. It could be a question, it could be a concern, it could be the fact that they forgot something that you told them, it could be the fact that they didn't understand something that you told them, it could be the fact that one of those terrible competitors has come in and thrown that fear, uncertainty, and doubt in it. But all of it ends up coming into the sales conversation either as a roadblock or a question. And so we know they're going to come up, and we want to be prepared for those. One of the challenges that I often find when I'm working with clients is when we go through the process of saying, what is the number one objective? Virtually every industry that I work in, the objections are the same. And talking with the sales reps, they come up again and again and again. So the question I have is, why aren't we prepared to address those? Why can't we get better at preempting the fact that that question could become a barrier? Why don't we anticipate it, be ready for it, practice how we're going to address it, and nail it in the moment when it comes up with a prospect? And we're going to talk a little bit about how we can do that. So let's look at the value buying process, because what I said is an objection is a barrier to how a customer buys. And this is just a simplified overview of what a customer goes through when they're buying the types of products that and services that you all sell on this phone. And if they aren't overtly going through this process, I promise you that the CFO or COO, when they approve either the expenditure or the capital, if for some of you that are selling capital equipment, that they're going to ask these questions. And that's really, understanding this will help you anticipate where objections could come into play. So number one, at the end of the day, what's going on in our business that is creating challenges or problems that this particular solution could address? And is this the best solution? In our world of the value selling framework, we call that creating a differentiated vision match with the prospect. And the interesting part of that is it's not whether we, as the supplier, vendor, or salesperson, think that we're the best solution and that these problems need to be addressed. That's interesting, but it's irrelevant. What is important is, does the person who has the authority, or more often the people who have the authority to make that decision, do they think it's the best solution? And sales is about understanding that customer specific answer and confirming that so that you can move forward with that. Sometimes objections come up because we don't have as solid as a vision match as the salesperson thinks we have, and we'll address that. Number two, once they've come up with that, which really answers the question, should I do business with this particular company to begin with, then at some point they have to answer the question, is it worth it? Is there enough value in what I expect the results to be as a result of doing business with this supplier to justify the expenditure? Now, if I have $1 million headache, will I invest $100,000 in that aspirin? Is it worth it? And sometimes objections come up about that, is it worth it? And the reality is, if price is the objection, going back to the poll a few minutes, value is the answer almost every time. And we'll talk a little bit about that. Have we gotten all the right people in terms of power involved in this decision? Have we vetted this supplier? Have we looked at everybody and anybody who's going to be impacted in this? And have they had an opportunity to weigh in on this decision? Do they have a vote? And is that vote necessary? So sometimes objections come up because we find out that we haven't involved all the right people. So all of a sudden I've sold to the decision maker who might be a financial decision maker, but I find out that the business unit or the user constituency is saying, wait a second, slow down, I'm not bought in yet. So power or the people could be the result of an objection. And then timing and the plan to not only determine that this is the right decision, but the plan to realize that value could result in an objection. So in value selling, when we look at the objections that come up in the course of trying to close an opportunity, almost always those objections have something to do with something going on in that buying process. And so we're going to come back to this as we understand what those objections are as well. So let's move on to what does that mean? Well, what that means is there's a lot going on in our customers' world that makes objections come up more and more. Let's face it. No one wants to be sold because the connotation is if I'm being sold, I'm being manipulated or I'm being convinced to do something that's not in my best interest. That said, most people want to buy when they believe it is in their best interest. So that is the current reality that we're dealing with, and sometimes those objections are a result of people feeling like they're being sold something that's not in their best interest as well. Let's also face it, in today's world, prospects are more educated than ever. They know more about our product when we come into that first meeting than they ever did before because of the social networking and the ability to get information easily from peers because of our websites, because of all kinds of reasons, they have more information. When I first started selling, the only way a customer could find out what I did and what I offered was for me to come into their office and then leave them a brochure. That is not the case anymore. Because they're educated, they come in armed with questions coming into those conversations. The other thing is the close isn't always an event. The close is the natural outcome of a well-executed sales cycle. So when I talk to my customers about, hey, we're just not closing enough deals, It's not that the sales reps don't have the skills to say, hey, are you ready to do business with me? Sign on the dotted line. It's that they missed something earlier in the sales cycle. Maybe they've made an assumption. Maybe they misunderstood something. Maybe they didn't have the courage to ask the hard questions because they were worried that if they asked that difficult question, they might get an answer that wasn't going to be helpful. And when you don't have the courage to ask the hard questions, you fill in the blanks with some information that might not be helpful. One of the other things that I often think about is, should we expect a no and have a plan, or expect the objection and have a plan, or just assume that if there isn't a no, they haven't voiced it? Sometimes I have found that clients go missing. I'm not sure it's ever happened to any of you, but I'm having a conversation with somebody. I go to call them next Tuesday, and they don't answer the phone, they don't respond to my email, and they don't call me back. And it could be that they're busy, but it also could be that they have some barrier for them, and I need to have a plan to get that information. Let's face it, the economic uncertainty also creates some challenges for our clients. And I think that those challenges represent themselves in their clients as being risk averse. And risk aversion can lead to objections, slower sales cycles, more people than ever being involved in those sales cycles, because I don't want to be the only person on the line for making this decision. I want to get as many people in the boat with me so that if, for some unforeseen reason that boat goes down, I am not alone in that boat. And all of these types of things come into our sales cycles as we go through this. So let's get into, what does that mean? How can we go through this, and how can we create urgency to get to close faster? Because if we can create some urgency in the client's mind, then when we get to the objection components, we hopefully will have enough inertia to move it forward. Urgency is all about value and motivation in the prospect's mind. And value is customer specific. And value is unique to the individual and potentially unique to the customer. Now, when I say it's unique to the customer, it doesn't mean that our value proposition is unique to them, but the actual quantification and measurement of that value is unique to that company and the individuals that we talk to. And the reality is, everybody is motivated. Some people are motivated for inaction, while others are motivated for action. Some people are motivated to avoid risk, while others are motivated to be risk takers. But understanding that motivation of the individuals that you call on and tapping into that motivation will help you better create urgency. And that's the key to value selling, quite frankly, but it's also the key to making sure that your sales cycle has got enough inertia to actually get it to a decision which results in a close or an agreement with the client to do business with you. And the other thing is, I often work with clients and that sell continuous services. And I know many of you on the line not only are responsible for bringing in new business, but you're also responsible for renewing that business and maintaining that client relationship. And the key to that is understanding that once that initial need is satisfied, it is no longer a motivator. So often, the rigor of the renewal sales cycle has to be as deliberate as the new business sales cycle. And we have to uncover new needs, new urgency, create new urgency by understanding the current motivation to continue and move forward, because it may be different than the motivation was a year ago. And if we make that assumption, we're in trouble. So let's take and look at a process for handling objections. We believe that objections are positive because what that means is they've been surfaced by the prospect and we can deal with them. An unaddressed objection will block your sale every time and you won't even know what's going on. So objections are positive. While we don't like them, it would be great if they didn't have questions and they just moved forward. If they do have questions and address those in the form of an objection, it gives us an opportunity to address it. The reality is when objections come up, we're still selling. There is a barrier to a decision and we need to understand what we can do. So addressing those is really, really positive. The other thing is oftentimes I find that objections can be a negotiating tactic. And as we're not going to specifically talk about negotiating skills and process today, understanding that the objection is a negotiating tactic as opposed to a real question or need for more information is important to go through. So that said, let's look at kind of our 5-step process. And the first step isn't necessarily a skill, but it is an attitude. And it's about being prepared, knowing they're going to come, and keeping our composure. Not taking the objection personally and not panicking that, oh my gosh, they're gonna ask some questions about price, or oh my gosh, they're gonna have real issues with our terms and conditions. I work with one client that was founded by a bunch of attorneys, and they therefore their terms and conditions and the fine print in their contracts are immense. And the salespeople know that when they get to that point in the sales cycle, it's going to be an issue every time. So how can we keep our composure, anticipate that, and be ready for it? The second part of handling objections is clarification. The worst thing we can do when it comes to objection handling is answer a question with the wrong information. So there's a couple of aspects to clarification that make sense. First of all, we need to really ask some good questions back to the prospect when an objection comes up. Do we understand the why they're asking that question? Do we understand the real concern or the real need that they have behind that question? Are we making any assumptions that could hurt us in that? The prospect's job is to clarify. Our job is to ask good clarifying questions. Years ago, I was in a sales cycle, and it was for a good-sized consulting deal at the time, and we had worked as a team in responding to this and had put together a very detailed proposal. And we had come into that proposal with really what we thought was fair, reasonable, market-driven pricing. And we, good, bad, or indifferent, we did not leave ourselves a lot of wiggle room to negotiate when it came to pricing. We kind of came in with a pretty good offer. Immediately, we got some pricing questions. And, of course, I, as a sales rep, assumed that meant that they thought our price was too high. Because we asked a lot of clarifying questions before we really gave them any answers, we learned that they didn't think our price was too high. They actually were worried that our price was too low, and therefore we may have to go back to them or be challenged in completing the consulting work. So again, if I had just addressed that and said, we've got 5% that we can move on here with that pricing, I would have actually hurt myself in that sales cycle as opposed to coming back and explaining how we could do the work for that price and why that would not put them at risk. So clarification is very important. Also, what happens when you clarify that, you get enough information and can often help validate that's a good question. That other clients may have realized something as a result of that. Once we go through that clarification and we really understand what their need is and the why behind the objection, we can go back to that value buying process, or for those of you that use the value selling framework, the qualified prospect formula, and really understand what area is kind of out of focus for that client. Maybe I need to re-educate, remind, or revalidate some information I've shared with them. Maybe I need to revisit part of that sales process that has come out of that. And what I mean by that, if they're all of a sudden asking some questions or raising objections about whether or not we are the best solution for them at this time, that to me says, okay, I have no longer have that differentiated vision match that I thought I had, and I need to go back and reopen that dialogue and be prepared to recreate that vision match. If it's about pricing, I want to go back to remind and revisit and recreate that confirmed value in the client's mind. And so you can understand that if these objections are coming up as I'm trying to get to close and I've missed a step early in the sales cycle of qualifying that prospect and really understanding their view, I'm going to be at risk or really challenged if I never had the value conversation to substantiate my price in the context of their value. And so reselling is important there. One of the other ways to identify whether or not this is a negotiating tactic is to sharp angle close. And what I mean by that is we want to isolate that this is the only objection at this point in time. So, for example, how that might sound is if somebody raises an objection to me, I will ask the question, if we address this and if I answer this satisfactorily for you, will you then be in a position to move forward? Because if it is a negotiating tactic, I want to try to get everything on the table so that I have a stronger leg to stand on during that negotiation. If I address one objection and then another one comes and another one comes and I have to address them all individually, I have less power and less leverage in that negotiation. So the sharp angle close is a great tactic to identify, is this objection a real question or concern, or is it a negotiating tactic? And if I come to that conclusion, I may address it down the road a little bit differently. And then last but not least, once I've done that work of clarifying, diagnosing, and isolating with a sharp angle close, I can be prepared to address and confirm. That might mean go back into that sales cycle and reconfirm, find out what changed, what information maybe was forgotten or lost or muddied by the prospect, or it might be some sort of a give and take, what we call a concession, an embellishment, or a trade-off that would be part of that final negotiation to get to close. And so let's look a little bit deeper at that diagnosis. We have found that when these objections come up at the end of the sales cycle, it always comes back to their buying process. What has happened? Maybe we were solving problems that really weren't connected to a business issue or business objective of that prospect. And in that case, all of a sudden, this is no longer a priority. I'm not sure if that's ever happened to you, but it's all important one day, and the next day, they've moved on to the next fire drill. And it's because those problems that flare up aren't connected to a business issue as much as we thought they would. Maybe we're not differentiated enough. If we can't differentiate successfully with the business decision makers, when we get into procurement, where it's their job to try to commoditize the purchase and disavow the uniqueness to get their own negotiating position, we're in trouble. So we need to make sure that we've got crisp, clear, confirmed differentiation with the business decision makers. Value. Often value is assumed, unfortunately, by sales reps, or they think the value proposition is enough and don't drive to quantifiable real value for that customer. So value and price become related, not because they're the same thing, but if the customer doesn't confirm the value, the price is in a vacuum. And who's to say whether it's too much or too little if there's nothing to compare it to? We all make value judgments every day. This is worth it to me. It's worth it to me to buy this new car. It's worth it to me to drive, far away to get a luxury item that I might want. It's worth it to me to pay a premium for XYZ service. And all of us could answer those questions differently, even though we may exhibit the same behavior. And the same is true of our clients. So we really want to understand and diagnose those objections effectively with this. And then once we do that, we can be in a position to kind of prepare for them. So think about what are the keys to your success, not only in selling, but in handling objections. And these are the things that we do up front in the sales cycle to help us be more successful downstream when we're ready to close. Have we established our credibility? Have we proven to the prospect, hey, been there, done that, have the t-shirt, and we are not a risky alternative? Even if you're in a new area or a new paradigm, can you establish your credibility both for your company and for you as an individual, that you have their best interest in mind and know how to address that? Are you deliberate with your differentiation? Not to assume that being different is enough. Differentiation is not just being different. It's not a laundry list of what's unique. It's really how do you create need for that uniqueness in the customer-specific scenario. Make sure you understand the why, not just the what the question is. Why is this question coming up? What is the underlying reason behind the question? As a matter of fact, years ago I was working with a colleague, and he was perceived as really, really smart, and some of us would laugh at him because he seemed to snooze through almost every business meeting we were at. We probably have worked with some people like that. Yet whenever he was called on, he would come up with some really bright things. So he obviously wasn't sleeping. But one of the things that I noticed is whenever somebody would pose something to him, he followed up with not what did you say or what did you mean. Why is that important? Why? And really was good at understanding the why so that he could come up with a unique solution for himself. Another key to success is anticipate and prepare. I would suggest if you were to go back at your pipeline for the last 12 months and look at some of your losses and the reason that potentially was given you to the loss, you would probably see some themes. And those themes could potentially be the objections that are coming up. And then as a team, as an organization, how do you prepare to address that? It's okay to have a unique, differentiated product as long as we can create need for that. It's okay to not be the least expensive alternative in whatever category you're in, as long as there's incremental value that justifies that premium purchase. So we need to really understand that, anticipate it, practice, and prepare for those objections because they're coming up. As I said, every customer that I'm working with, it's the same objections. No budget, price too high. Maybe we can do it ourselves, which leads to differentiation. Do we really need this, which means value and business issue are likely the issues. Or all of a sudden all these other people have to be involved and we haven't proactively created a plan to reach them. So some of those things are really things to think about. So I'm going to wrap up right here, and what I'm going to ask you to do is if you have any questions or comments, go ahead and put them in your Q&A tab, and I'll get ready to address them. I also want to share a few pieces of information with you as we go through this the questions. But the reality is we're going to get objections. We can't completely avoid them. People are going to have questions. People are going to want to negotiate. People are going to forget information that we may have, or they may realize they need more information. So being prepared and understanding what those likely objections are is going to make you a better sales rep. If you focus on value, you will minimize not only the price objection. I'm not saying it's going to go away completely, because everybody wants a deal and everybody expects their price to be substantiated. But if you focus on value, you will not only create urgency, you will also minimize that price objection by having context for your price to be relevant for that customer. Think about it. I'm going to give you $1. At some point, that prospect is going to ask, am I getting $1's worth of goods and services in return? So make sure you're prepared for that. And if you can quantify that value, you're going to be much more effective at substantiating your price. And then handling those objections, being prepared for them, practicing them, understanding the process and how to validate, clarify, diagnose, and isolate will make you better at how you address them. The more information you have, the better off you will be. And that is typical of every aspect of sales, but absolutely critical when we get into the close and ultimately getting to the agreement, which is what we ultimately seek. I mean, at the end of the day, we all know as salespeople, we are the revenue manufacturing arm of our customers, of our employers. We manufacture customers and revenue, and that's a process that if we can get better at, we are going to improve our revenue generating capabilities and our customer generating capabilities. So I'm going to start flipping through some of the questions here, and if you stay with us, I've got some great information to share with you at the end. So here's a question. What's the best way to get through to a client that's gone dark? They're avoiding contact. In a way, this is a form of objection, and I find it hard to overcome. One of the best ways to avoid a client or a person going dark is to begin to expand the relationships within the organization. So if we can expand our relationships so we're not dependent on a single point of contact, we can minimize that. Also, I think what happens is we need to get sometimes creative when we're working with people. Multiple modes of communication, multiple people, as I mentioned, is another strategy from that perspective. And then stop filling in the fact that they have gone dark with all the negative self-talk that we go. It's like, oh my gosh, I did something wrong. Oh my gosh, they're not going to buy. I have a prospect that called me yesterday. I've been talking to him for a year. The plan we've been working with keeps kind of creeping forward a little bit. Hadn't responded to my messages in a couple of months. And he called me yesterday, and I said, I'm so happy to hear from you. And he said, well, you knew I would call you when I had more information. I appreciate that you kept reaching out and staying top of mind. I really had nothing new to say, so I was just waiting for that. And guess what? We're back on track with an accelerated plan and timeline to actually move that opportunity forward. So sometimes going dark is not a bad thing, but minimize that by having multiple points of contact within a company. What would be a good response to customers who say we have no funding for this? Well, the question I would have is, if you look at that from a diagnostic perspective in the process we talked about, have you uncovered A, enough differentiation, and B, enough value? Or are you even talking to the right person? Because if you've uncovered enough differentiation and enough value, and then they're still not saying that we don't have the funding for this, the question is that doesn't make sense. If this is truly adding incremental value to your business and addressing real acknowledged problems and the business, then why wouldn't someone go find the funding? So somehow in that diagnostic, there's something to go under that. And again, if you've gone through that sales cycle effectively, now you can go back and revisit. Well, you said that it was worth it because of this, that, and the other thing. If the funding hasn't been released, how are you going to solve those problems? Or who can get the funding? Maybe it's an indication that you're not calling on the right person. So diagnostic is really key. What if a client says, I see the value, but we just don't have the budget? I would ask the question, how do your budgets get set? Who has the power to change the budget? If the value is real, why wouldn't that budget be adjusted? Budgets are just buckets of where we think we're going to spend future money. Sometimes they're a guideline that says we can't spend more than this, but other times it's like, hey, I think I'm going to spend, $10 here, $20 there, and $30 there, but at the end of the day, I'm only going to spend $75, but I might change category A for category B if I think I'm going to get better return for that. So budgets change every single day in business. I would want to get below that. That could just be a brush off, because as a sales rep, you can't say, you can find the budget, even though we know that. We don't have access to their budget process, but someone's got the power to change the budget, and I believe budgets change every single day. Somebody's asking a question. I thought you would give responses to objections. The interesting thing is handling objections is a process. I don't have the 10 words that you can say every time you get a price objection. You need to really understand the process to understand the customer, listen, and then address it based on what your response is. So I would encourage you all to focus less on the words when it comes to handling it, because all of you work for companies that have different negotiables, different non-negotiables, different products, different services, different empowerment as a sales rep of what you can do. So I would focus on the process and then work on the words with your individual teams of what are the best practices to actually address that. If I haven't had a chance to get to your exact question, we'll be addressing those either in an upcoming newsletter or blog post. So stay tuned for that information as well. As I mentioned, today's session is being recorded, and it will be available on valueselling.com under the resources tab later this afternoon. You can either watch the recording or download these slides. If you're on valueselling.com and want more information about our suite of online training courses or other resources, you can visit our e-store. And then last but not least, let me let you know about 2 different webinars that we will be conducting in the next 30 days. First of all, the value selling webinar will be September 15th, and we're going to talk about how you can use anxiety questions and anxiety to finish the year strong, as many of you will be entering the 4th quarter as we get into the 4th quarter of the calendar year. And if you're not entering your 4th quarter, many of your customers are, and so therefore your buying season may be heating up from that perspective. And then also I will be conducting a webinar with the Value Selling and Realization Council on August 30th. And that's really the business of knowing your customer's business, one of the keys to selling and competing on value. We will send out information with that as well, about that webinar as well. It will not be conducted from valueselling.com, but rather from the Value Selling and Realization Council, and I hope you can join us on that one as well. One other thing to let you know about is Value Selling will be announcing a new program in the next few weeks called Business Speak, which is really a business acumen, how to prepare and execute executive sales calls. And if this is something that you are interested in, please contact us or contact your value selling representative, and you can get more information on that. Please share your comments with us on social media. Join our LinkedIn group if you haven't done that well. Tweet if you're a tweeter at Value Selling without the E in value, VALUSELLING. Any comments, feedback, questions, and we'll continue the dialogue on Twitter and LinkedIn today. Last but not least, any questions or comments, please let us know how we can better serve you, both through these webinars and as well in all of your interactions with Value Selling Associates. I hope you all have a wonderful day. Go close a lot of business this month, and we'll see you either on August 30th or September 15th. Thank you for joining us. Take care.